Coming up on KPBS Evening Edition, hundreds of people rallied downtown today against new federal rules on contraception coverage.
And a Camp Pendleton Marine has earned one of the U.S. military's highest honors. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dwayne Brown.
And I'm Amitha Sharma, in for Joanne Farian.
The debate over contraception and religious freedom came to San Diego today. Hundreds of people rallied in front of the county administration building, protesting federal rules forcing most employers to provide birth control in their health plans. The rules are part of the federal health care law. Religious groups say it goes against their moral principles, even with an amendment requiring insurers to bear the cost.
Mayoral candidate Carl DeMaio is leading the pack in campaign fundraising with $450,000 of his own money going into his coffers. Our media partner, Investigative News Source, took a look at the latest financial reports from the candidates. DeMaio has raised more than $1 million. Assemblyman Nathan Fletcher raised just under $1 million, followed by District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis and Congressman Bob Filner. The fifth candidate, Tobias Pettis, reports raising just under $25,000.
No change in San Diego's unemployment rate last month. The state Employment Development Department says the rate held steady in February at 9.3%. The biggest job gains were in education and healthcare. There's been a delay in a corruption case involving officials with the Sweetwater Union High School District. It's supposed to give attorneys more time to go through the evidence. Two current trustees, the former superintendent and a former board member, are all accused of accepting gifts from contractors in exchange for their votes on school construction projects. This week, a construction company executive pleaded guilty to providing gifts.
Officials with the African Union say increased interest in the warlord Joseph Kony has spurred new efforts to track him down. Much of that interest was sparked by a movie made by the San Diego-based group Invisible Children. It was posted online earlier this month and has received millions of hits. Kony is accused of kidnapping children and turning them into soldiers and sex slaves. Now the African Union says it is sending 5,000 soldiers to join the hunt for Kony.
California will soon have money to fund a statewide network of electric car charging stations. Governor Jerry Brown says the money will come from a $120 million settlement with NRG Energy. It's for costs related to the state's energy crisis a decade ago. The money will pay for at least 200 public charging stations. The governor's goal is to have 1.5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2025. Camp Pendleton Marine will be awarded the Silver Star for braving gunfire to retrieve a fallen comrade. It happened in Afghanistan on Thanksgiving Day almost 2 years ago. Sergeant Ryan Sotelo will be awarded the nation's third highest honor for valor on March 30th at the base in Oceanside. Sotelo took charge of the 3-5 unit after the platoon commander was fatally shot. He sprinted through heavy gunfire to retrieve the body and led his squad out of an ambush. His unit, by the way, suffered the highest casualties in Afghanistan during their 7-month deployment. Sotelo is now a section leader with the weapons company based at Camp Pendleton. Another Marine is facing a discharge over his online activities. That's one of the stories Amitha is talking about over at the Evening Edition Roundtable.
Is he a flamethrower or a Marine blazing a trail for free speech rights in the military? And it's been billed as the savior of the city of San Diego's pension woes. But revelations about a pension reform measure on the June ballot raise questions about its effectiveness if it passes. Joining me are reporters Tony Perry from the LA Times and Ellison St. John from KPBS News. Tony, Sergeant Gary Stein, a Marine, faces a discharge because of comments he posted on his Armed Services Tea Party Facebook page that were critical of President Obama. How familiar are troops with Pentagon policy forbidding them from engaging in political activity?
I think they're very, very familiar, not possibly that particular statute in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, but they know. Just like around the dinner table, you know how far you can push your father before in an argument before you wish you hadn't. They know. You want spout off to your buds in the barracks or at the VFW hall in Vista, fine. To a reporter with a notebook, not fine. On a website, particularly not fine. They know.
Well, a reader on your website said, look, the military is meant to preserve democracy, not practice it. What's the thinking behind this policy forbidding military personnel from expressing themselves politically in a public way?
The military is not a democracy. The military is different than all other kinds of employment, including other governmental jobs. You may be asked someday, told someday to go from point A to point B. This is particularly true of Marines. And with a good potential that you're going to get killed at point B, maybe horribly killed. And you have no right not to move from point A to point B. You cannot debate it. It's not a debating society. It is different than all other kinds of employment. They know when they sign on the dotted line that they're going to put certain of their free speech rights in escrow. Can't touch them while they're in. Can reclaim them once they're out, and they will have grown interest because you can stand on the street corner and say, I served my country and now I believe thus and so. Can't do it in uniform while you're serving. The military says it needs to preserve what they call good order and discipline. Discipline is the key word.
The thing is that he is getting a certain amount of support from people, even on our blog, Home Post. There are a lot of people who are supporting his right, and he is claiming that it's his constitutional right of free speech. Now, the ACLU, who stand up for that, actually did go to bat for him, apparently, a couple of years ago. But what's different?
When he first did his blog, Armed Forces Tea Party, the ACLU sent a letter to his commanding officer saying, essentially, tread lightly now. He does have certain rights. I understand you have needs too, good order and discipline, but tread lightly. And they did. And he took down certain comments and away he went. Now, 2 years later, he put other comments up, different commanding officer, I might point out. Mm-hmm. And now they looked into it. They decided no criminal charges. The comments weren't all that flamboyant, weren't all that out of line. But he did say that he disagreed with the commander-in-chief about this, this, and this. And they looked into it, and they said, no criminal charges. We're going to do an administrative procedure, which will probably end up with him being demoted and dismissed from the military prior to July, which was to be the end of his active duty service. He had hoped to re-enlist. He's 26 years old, 9 years in, so he's like halfway to a pension. I don't see that occurring. I see him being either dismissed or sort of set down at a desk. He's a weather forecaster. Set down on a desk just to ride the desk until it's over, till he's out of the United States Marine Corps.
What's your sense, though? Is he a provocateur? Is he someone who is genuinely trying to bring military brass to his way of thinking, which is, look, troops put their lives on their line in the name of political policies, certain political policies, and they ought to be entitled to express their opinion?
I think he's a very honest young man who really believes that that should be the case, that if you're having to put your life on the line for political decisions, you ought to be able to express your views about that under certain regulations. He claims that he hasn't broken the Department of Defense regulations. He's never spoken out in uniform. He's never prefaced some of his comments by saying, I'm a Marine and therefore I believe thus and so. Yes, but you did start a website that said Armed Forces Tea Party, and you have said certain things. I think he's genuine, and he really does believe this. On the other hand, to be quite candid, 2012, with all that's going on in the United States military foreign policy, I think he's trying to put a saddle on a dead horse.
Well, the thing is that I guess the question is, what is the specific thing that has made the military sort of crack down now and say, look, we're going to ask you to leave? Is it because he was criticizing the commander-in-chief? And from that perspective, I think it's important to look at how, whatever political persuasion you have, I mean, he might have been criticizing George Bush. In this particular case, it was Obama. But is that the key point?
Seems to be, and he said on the website he wouldn't follow unlawful orders, and he defined those as the order to kill Americans. You may remember there's that issue about Americans that go over to Al-Qaeda, can they be killed? And then also take weapons away from Americans. I'm not sure where that came out. And then he also said, we've all got to get together here and defeat President Obama with a Republican.
Okay, we're going to have to move on to pension reform. Allison, this week, the City of San Diego's independent budget analyst came out and said that savings from the pension reform ballot measure on the June ballot would not come from moving city workers over to these 401k-style pension plans, but would come from freezing their salaries. Have voters been misled?
Well, I think that is something voters really need to consider carefully, is if they're voting for pension reform because they believe that people need to be moved from a guaranteed pension to a 401k like the private sector has, then what this reveals is that that is not going to save the city money. And in fact, it's going to cost the city money over the long term, $13 million over 30 years. So for the voter who is voting for it because they believe that public servants should not actually be getting a guaranteed pension, they should be getting the same pension, that has turned out not to be the case. So the other side of it is, though, that it will save the city money if, in fact, the second part of the provision holds true, which is that they would cap the pensionable pay, the pay on which the pension is based, for the next 5 years. So,
but there is no guarantee of that either. San Diego City Attorney Jan Goldsmith has said that, look, that is an initial bargaining position, but the City Council can override it by 6 votes. So is there any guarantee, if this ballot measure is passed, that there would be a savings?
Well, I think that if you're a voter hoping that this measure is going to save the city millions of dollars, that is the disappointing conclusion from both the IBA's analysis and the city attorney's analysis, that, you know, one of them won't save the city money and the other one would, but it's not legally binding. So that, you know, it can be the city's original bargaining position to go in saying we're going to freeze these pensionable pay levels, but you know, the courts could say you have to go back and meet and confer and negotiate. You cannot just set pay by a voter's initiative. It's not legally binding. So the totality of it is that, unfortunately, however much voters might have wanted this thing to guarantee a huge amount of savings, it doesn't guarantee any savings for the city.
It just seems so difficult. Man and boy, we have been at this for a decade in San Diego, and yet there is still so much more to go. Those things which can happen overnight in the private sector, non-unionized private sector, seem to take in the public sector years and years and years of litigation and lawsuits and even criminal charges. Is there any sort of hope out there that the city will one day be done with this and it won't dominate our public discussion as it does now?
Well, I think that, you know, if you listen to what the mayoral candidates are saying, Bob Filner, who is the one mayoral candidate who disagrees with the initiative, he is saying, look, there are ways to cut the pension costs for the city, but not by sort of fiat, by an initiative. I mean, I think that's the trouble with initiatives, is that they are sometimes, almost always, when they're controversial, challenged in the courts. So that isn't necessarily going to be the quick way to find the solution.
He wants
either.
pension bonds. I mean, isn't that akin to debt consolidation loans? Just obligate, in this case, our children for the next decade?
The county of San Diego has taken out pension bonds to solve its pension crisis, and they did that years ago, resulting in an apparently very stable situation, but it's as a result of bonds.
I want to jump in here really quickly. So 3 of the 4 mayoral candidates, you mentioned Congressman Filner, but the other 3,
yes,
Nathan Fletcher, Carl DeMaio, and Bonnie Dumanis, has this independent budget analyst report changed their point of view at all?
I don't think so, no. They're basically focusing on, it all depends on how you focus on it, and if they're focusing on the savings of more than $900 million over 30 years, I guess ignoring the legal challenges, it does look like a good measure to save the city money. So that is the aspect of this initiative that they are continuing to support.
Okay, Allison St. John, Tony Perry, thank you for speaking to us today.
And we've got more analysis of pension reform and the debate over that Camp Pendleton Marine Sergeant's Facebook page on our website, kpbs.org. Supporters of the unconditional surrender statue make their case for a permanent version on the San Diego waterfront. But first, bringing new hope to millions of people who've given up because of vision problems. We'll take you on a tour of the Braille Institute in San Diego. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
Coming up on Finding Your Roots, lifelong friends Harry Connick Jr. and Branford Marsalis embark on a search for their ancestors.
This is your family. These are your people.
Wow. Wow, never saw that before.
They explore the history of their beloved city.
New Orleans, this is one of those places where if that's what you wanted to do, that's what you could do.
Finding Your Roots.
Sunday at 8 on KPBS. Tuesday at 10 on KPBS. KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
You fight for sight unseen. Through the dark, you search for the spark that makes blurred vision clean. Those are some of the lyrics written in a song about the San Diego Braille Institute, where folks experiencing sight loss or blindness have found new hope. This is one of the many classes the Braille Institute in La Jolla offers to fuel the mind, body, and spirit. Even therapy dogs like Jewel are into it. The mission? Eliminate barriers and help folks adapt to a new life caused by blindness or severe sight loss.
Here we're in our expressive arts room where we really just have a whole lot of examples about what people can really do.
The Institute's Joy Durbin says many of the students had given up after losing their sight, but found a new way to express themselves through various forms of art.
Because a lot of our individuals who are coming to Braille have an age-related vision loss, and so maybe their impairment has worsened over time, but they still have perhaps a memory of color or scope and things like that.
For the first time, the Braille Institute has put on a spring boutique for students to sell their artwork.
I have no peripheral vision.
Lori Johns is an artist, jewelry maker, and teaches an employment class.
Before, I didn't know how to get around without hurting myself. Ran into things all the time and people.
This is one of the official Christmas cards for the Braille Institute. They chose my painting for it.
Jane Randall is almost blind. She had given up on painting until her husband told her the center offered a watercolors class.
You know that I have done some of my best work since I've been blind.
And lyricist Curtis Long was so inspired by the program, he wrote a song about the Braille Institute.
Hail, oh, hail, Braille Institute, we gather at your door.
Generous donors, staff, and hundreds of volunteers provide the programs and services without charge, and the students at the Braille Institute range in age from 19 to 102.
Disturbance in the universe.
The controversial statue of a sailor kissing a nurse will soon leave San Diego's shores, but an exact replica may replace it. My guests are leading the charge to have a permanent bronze version of Unconditional Surrender placed in the exact same spot next to the Midway, which will cost almost $1 million. Joining me are architect Donald Reeves and the president of the USS Midway Museum, Mac McLaughlin. Don, I want to start with you. Why should San Diego have a permanent version of Unconditional Surrender?
Well, there are a couple of answers, but essentially it's asserted itself on so many people by now that it feels it belongs here. Everybody that's seen it, without exception, and I've spent a lot of time down there, the comments are all beautiful comments that come back about the sculpture and what it adds to the overall scene of the waterfront and the Navy presence in our city. So it just adds to the whole city's atmosphere and the draw that we have as a city.
Mac, the Midway is stepping in to raise almost $1 million. Make the case. Why should donors, why should San Diegans chip in to raise money for this statue?
Well, I think this statue, where it's placed right now in San Diego, is going to be a timeless piece. Certainly there will be a lot of people in San Diego that will not be contributing to this, and they don't like it. I think the vast majority will, and I think we'll be successful in raising the money we need to buy the permanent bronze statue.
Let's talk about some of the people who do not like it. Critics of the statue, including some members, prominent members of the arts community, have called it kitschy. They say it's cartoonish. What is your response to that?
I understand as studiers of art how they could come to that conclusion. I think even perhaps if you take that statue out of the context it's in right now, you could come to that conclusion. But in the context of the Midway in the background, Veterans Park surrounding it, the memorials to the greatest generation surrounding it, really that's going to become an anchor to Tuna Park in the future. And while I'm respectful of their views, I also get to observe the public who has fallen in love with that statue, and that's why we want to save it.
But just because something is popular, does that mean it's good, Don?
No, and we've never purported that it's the best or finest. It's not a David. But for San Diego, it's great. It's in the right setting, and it's the right piece of sculpture for that spot.
You say it's in the right setting. We've had commenters on our website and the UT San Diego website say, look, you know, this statue commemorates an event that took place in 1945 in Times Square in New York. It's not even a local event. Why do we have it here?
It's not really about where it occurred. I mean, if you look at the Iwo Jima monument that it's in Arlington Cemetery, also of a very famous photograph overlooking Washington, D.C., you have a timeless tribute to the bravery of the Marine Corps. When I look at the KISS, and when a lot of our public looks at the KISS, they are flashed to a time when all of America was united, happy, so pleased that the World War II was finally over. And when we build this statue, we will write that in an inscription there, and people will understand what it really means. It's not really about a sailor kissing a nurse. It's not really about it was in Times Square. It's really about a time in our nation's history where we were at peace, and the fundamental nature of American citizens who love it when all of America is at peace.
So you say that the public has fallen in love with it. Do you have any sense of how many members of the public are actually tourists and how many members are locals?
Well, I don't have any sense of that. I know a lot of locals walk by it and enjoy it on their way to the fish market constantly. The tourist crowd is always going by there. You even see tourist bus stopping there and pulling up. School groups go over there. And over time, this will become a great, iconic snapshot of San Diego. When I saw the picture of the statue on Monday Night Football, with the Midway in the background as just a snapshot of San Diego, it resonated with me as this being a great Navy town with a wonderful veteran population and a wonderful citizenry that supports that. And that's why that works so well down there.
Very quickly, where do your fundraising efforts stand?
We will be announcing very shortly where we stand and what our plan is, probably within the next couple of weeks. By the middle of April, we'll be coming out with the Midway's attempt to help Don Reeves, the man who's brought this to San Diego and kept it here for the last 5 years, to be successful. And we'll get the painted bronze permanent sculpture put down there with a nice walkway and wonderful cherry trees in the background and some benches to sit, and people will really be able to enjoy the Bayside.
Mac, Don, thank you for speaking to us today.
You're welcome.
You can have your say on unconditional surrender at kpbs.org. In a moment, what some of you are saying about health care reform in our public square. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next news hour, the charges against Robert Bales, accused of shooting 17 Afghans, plus Mark Shields and David Brooks. That's Friday on the PBS NewsHour.
Doc
Martin is back.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a new season, and he's a new dad.
Look at that. Brand new little family. It's disgusting.
But he's leaving Port Wend, and they've already replaced him.
I'm Dr. Dibbs. The new doctor said I could have some for my ankles.
Well, she's wrong. Put it back. Can Martin and Louisa make it work now that there's a baby?
Bit of a puzzler there then, eh, Doc?
The season premiere of Doc Martin.
Watch new episodes, part of a season premiere event, Thursday at 8 on KPBS.
The American people
have named PBS
the most trusted source of news
and public affairs
for the 8th year
In a row,
trust.
the American people
have spoken.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Public Square on KPBS Evening Edition. Next week, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments over the constitutionality of President Obama's health care reform law. The rulings, according to law professors, will impact health care in the United States for generations to come. The hearings are being billed as the case of the 21st century. Many of you shared your views on our Public Insight Network. Rami Zomiski says, "We have been paying for mandatory health care for years. It is called Medicare. The Constitution says the government must provide our general welfare. Health care is a basic need of us all." And Jennifer Farnsworth told us this: "If I get pregnant, insurance can no longer call it a pre-existing condition or refuse to cover the obstetrics and maternity. I can't believe we had to wait for Obama's presidency to make this happen." You can weigh in on the conversation by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, and of course, you can email us.
Recapping tonight's top stories, the federal debate over covering birth control came to San Diego today. Hundreds of people rallied downtown against health care reform requiring the coverage. Religious groups say it would force them to go against their teaching. San Diego's unemployment rate held steady in February at 9.3%. It's still down nearly a full point compared to a year ago. And a Camp Pendleton Marine is being awarded a Silver Star for valor. Sergeant Ryan Sotelo is being honored for braving enemy gunfire to retrieve a fallen comrade in Afghanistan. You can watch and comment on any of the stories you saw tonight on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. We leave you with a look at the forecast.